We've looked at major and minor scales in a fair bit of detail, and I want to go over some other scales in this video that are important to know depending on the genres of music you do, can be very useful, but part of a good, well-rounded education of music theory. I want to start by one that's called the whole tone scale. Now in this scale, each note is an interval of a whole step from the other note. So this is a 6-note scale. It's also called a hexatonic scale. And there's no leading tone in this scale because all of the tones are the same distance apart. There's no semitones. So no single tone stands out as more important than the others. So let me show you. Starting on C, we have consecutive whole tones. C, D, E, F sharp, G sharp, A sharp, C. So no leading tone. Now all triads that are built on these scale tones are all augmented triads. It's one of the unique qualities of this scale. So those are all augmented triads going up the scale tones, and they all are augmented because they're all using the tones of that scale. And another interesting quality of the scale is if you play 2 augmented triads a tone apart, you'll get all the notes of the scale. So let's say I go C augmented, and then add D augmented. That's the entire augmented scale. This is considered to be a symmetric scale, since you can start it on any degree, and it'll still always be the same. So let's say I started on another scale tone. Or started here. It functions the same no matter which scale tone you started on. And the good news about this scale is there's only 2 of them that you have to learn. You don't need to learn it in all 12 keys because it repeats every tone apart. So we just saw that starting it on any degree, it's basically the same scale. So C, whole tone, D, E, F sharp, G sharp, A sharp, C, that's all the same whole tone scale. And the other whole tone scale is a half tone away, starting on, let's say, the D flat. Same thing applies. You can start it on any degree of that. So there's only 2 whole tone scales to learn. The thing with symmetric scales like this is they lend themselves to playing patterns, depending, of course, what you're doing. But if you're talking about any kind of improvisational type of playing where you're improvising over chords, they lend themselves well to patterns. Things like that. Let's move on and look at another type of symmetric scale, the diminished scale. This is considered to be an octatonic scale because it consists of 8 separate degrees or steps. So it's a symmetrical scale, but not in the same way as the whole tone scale. This one is constructed from alternating whole and half steps. This is also referred to as the whole tone half tone scale or a half tone whole tone scale. So this is the way it works if we're starting on C. Whole, half, whole, half, whole, half, whole, half. So it's consecutive whole tones and half tones. So just like the whole tone scale consists of 2 interlocking augmented triads, this scale is based on 2 interlocking diminished 7th triads. So if I go C diminished 7th, and then add on D diminished 7th, I'm going to get all the notes in the scale. There are only 3 different key centers to learn this in since they repeat every 3 semitones. So that's the good news about these special types of scales. There's no such thing as learning them in 12 keys. Because, for example, this C diminished scale, it's the same thing if we started on E flat. Or if we started on F sharp. Or if we started on A. Because it repeats every 3 half tones. So we only need to learn 3 different variations of it. The next one would be this one. And that repeats starting on E. And on G. And then on B flat. And then the third whole tone, half tone scale would start on D natural. And then repeats a minor third up. And then a minor third up again. And then on B. So only 3 of them to learn. And being a symmetrical scale, this also lends itself to patterns. Things like that. Patterns work nicely on these types of symmetric scales. I don't want to get too much into jazz harmony, but these can be used in different ways. I mentioned that it can also be used as a halftone whole tone if you just started on a different degree, and then it works under a dominant 7 harmony rather than a diminished harmony, but just to give you a little taste of that. Here it is on a diminished chord, the regular whole tone halftone version. But I can use it on a dominant 7 chord using the halftone whole tone version. So here's that same diminished scale whose principal tones are C, E flat, F sharp, and A, but instead of over C diminished, over, let's say, an F7, and then the tones become the 3rd, 5th, flat 7th, and flat 9th. But again, I don't want to get too much into jazz harmony, just giving you a taste of what that's like. Let's move on. The next type of scale is called a pentatonic scale. Now, this is a scale with 5 pitches per octave, and there are many different types of pentatonic scales. The most common is the major pentatonic. One way of thinking of the construction is that it's made up of 5 consecutive pitches from the circle of fifths, and then transposing them to fit into 1 octave. It's an interesting way of conceiving it. So if we start on C and we go through the circle of fifths, we get C, G, D, A, E, all 5th apart, but put them all into 1 octave. And that's a C pentatonic scale, a major pentatonic scale. Another way of thinking of it, which I find a bit easier, at least when you're working in different keys, that circle of fifths works nicely starting there, but an easier way of thinking of it is that it's like a major scale, but it leaves out the 3rd and 7th degree. So in C, we have C, D, E, leave out the F, G, A, leave out the B. So that's a regular major pentatonic, and this type of scale also lends itself nicely to patterns. Just to give you a few basic common ideas, you can do things like this. Just going up the scale or coming down. Here's another example. See if you recognize this well-known bass line to a popular song. My Girl. Now these you do have to learn in all 12 keys, but again, it's fairly simple. I just think of it as the 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 5th, and 6th degrees of a scale. So you can go up chromatically or through the cycle of fifths, but it's a good idea to get familiar with them all. Like that. Now another type is a minor pentatonic scale. The term is most commonly used to refer to the pentatonic scale that's built on the relative minor, derived from the major pentatonic. So in other words, let's say we wanted to construct a C minor pentatonic. We would use the pentatonic scale in E flat, since C minor is the relative minor of E flat. So the notes would be like this, starting on C. Because E flat pentatonic starts like this. So just started on the C. We get the C, the flat 3rd, 4th, 5th, flat 7th, and then the root again. So the relative minor of E flat is C, so we use the notes of the E flat major pentatonic in C for a C minor pentatonic. So let's say another example, let's say the A minor pentatonic would be the notes of the regular C pentatonic scale, since the A is the relative minor of C. So A minor pentatonic would be this. So minor pentatonic. And this leads us into our next type of scale, the blues scale. This is basically a minor pentatonic, but adding in the flatted 5th. So let's say we're going back to that example of the C minor pentatonic. We add in the F sharp, since that's what we call a blue note, or the flatted 5th. It's a really stock blues scale. You can also use it over minor chords, but it's particularly bluesy when you use it over dominant 7th chords like that. But again, I don't want to get into jazz theory too much at the moment. So those are some different ways of using pentatonic scales and adding in the flatted 5th to turn it into a blues scale. So that's it. Learn these, get familiar with them, and I'll see you for more in the next video.